Hi everyone, my name is Laura and welcome back to my channel. Today, in honor of Pride Month, I'm going to be giving you some recommendations for trans representation in manga. I'm going to kick things off with Claudine, and this was written in 1978, and this is by the creator of The Rose of Versailles, if you're familiar with the series. This happens to be the oldest recommendation that I'm going to be sharing, and one that is quite a quick read, but a very powerful read. This series follows Claudine, who we meet as a child who was born in a female body but identifies as a male. When we are introduced to Claudine, his mother brings him to a doctor, to a specialist, to consult in basically trying to understand why Claudine identifies as a male. The doctor finds it very surprising that even at such a young age, Claudine is pretty much sure that they were born in the wrong body. And throughout the series, you get to see Claudine grow up and experience different kinds of relationship. You see Claudine interact with his family, with friends, with romantic partners as well. Since this story does follow Claudine's life, you get to experience the high points, and you're also going to be experiencing a lot of Claudine's lows and very tragic moments in life. Claudine also experiences betrayal by family as well. Some of the things I really enjoyed about reading Claudine is not only the beautiful artwork, as you can see, the storytelling is amazing. The pacing also for a one-shot was really well done. It is a very tragic story, but sometimes you can find beauty in tragedy, and this is definitely one of those stories. If you have not yet read Claudine, I would highly recommend it. I mean, not only are you reading part of manga history, but also one of the very early portrayals of transsexual characters in manga. I gotta balance things out, so I just gave you a tragedy. Now we're going for something more upbeat. We have Skip and Loafer, and while our protagonist is not transsexual, her aunt is. If Skip and Loafer looks familiar, it did just get an anime adaptation, and you also get to meet Mitsumi's aunt, who is a transsexual woman. Within the very first pages of Skip and Loafer, you're introduced to Nao-chan right here. This is Mitsumi's aunt who lives in Tokyo. She's this very tall and fashionable woman who cares a lot about her niece. While Skip and Loafer is not a trans story, the portrayal of a trans character within Skip and Loafer is probably one of the best that I have seen, because she's just living life as she is. She's not portrayed as a caricature. They don't make a huge deal about Nao-chan being a trans woman. Take this scene for example. They could have easily focused more on kind of making fun of Nao-chan, especially because they do zoom into the Adam's apple, but instead the focus is not on the fact that she is a trans woman, but the fact that she cares so deeply about her niece. In volume 3, you get Mitsumi's friends having a sleepover at her place, and here we have Nao-chan just reminding Mitsumi to let her friends know that her aunt was born biologically a male, so in case anything does happen, just so they're not caught off guard. Again, in this whole sleepover scene, the focus is not on Nao-chan being a trans woman, but instead you get to see how much she cares not only about Mitsumi, but about the friendships that she's forming. And you really do get to see Nao-chan's really caring personality when one of the girls feels uncomfortable and embarrassed and wants to leave the sleepover, and Nao-chan just has a heart-to-heart and kind of convinces her to not feel ashamed and go back and have fun with the other girls. While there's so many amazing characters within Skip and Loafer, Nao-chan happens to be one of my favorites just because of how caring, nurturing, and compassionate she is. So she's definitely a standout character in this series, and just her portrayal within the series is one that I highly recommend. So like I said, although the series is not following a trans character, her portrayal is one of my favorite ones that I've seen, and definitely worth checking out. The next series is one that I've spoken about before, but I'm going to talk about it again just because it is an incredible series. It is complete with 4 volumes. Here we have Boys Run the Riot. I spoke about this 2 years ago in my Pride Month picks, but it's just that good, so I'm gonna mention it again. So this is a story written by a trans mangaka about a trans character. So it is written with so much care and so much passion. The story follows Ryo, who's a high school boy who goes to a school where he cannot freely express himself. When we first meet Ryo, he's a high school student that Although he knows his identity, he cannot outwardly express his identity, especially in front of his classmates. And very quickly, we get introduced to a character that helps Ryo find his voice. And he happens to be the new kid in school who has a completely different appearance, a completely different aura about him, and Ryo just finds him very fascinating. Within the first chapter, you get to see Ryo in a very vulnerable state, but also when he's at his most comfortable, which is in streetwear clothing. So you can see how much Ryo really enjoys this world. And that's when he bumps into his classmate who's into the same things that he is, the streetwear, the graffiti, all that stuff. And he finds himself a very meaningful friendship. Boys from the Riot is a coming to age story that focuses on identity, self-acceptance, and also friendship. And one of my favorite moments within volume 1 is when Ryo tells Jin that he's a transgender male, and Jin, instead of making a big fuss about it, he's just kind of like, okay. Like, you should have said that before. Like, it's no big deal, because what he cares is not his gender identity, but the fact that he just met someone that's super cool that he can vibe with, and they both enjoy the same things, which is fashion. And what's more beautiful than finding a friend that just truly accepts you? The story follows Ryo and Jin's journey to start a streetwear brand, and overall it's such a fun and powerful read. I highly recommend it. I mean, it's the second time that I've recommended it, so definitely check this out, and don't skip on the afterword. I know a lot of people tend to skip like the author's notes, but in this case it just adds on to the story, so definitely do not skip it. My next recommendation is To Strip the Flesh. This was a recommendation by one of my friends, Ivan, and I really enjoyed this one. So it is a collection of short stories. Unfortunately, my favorite story, which is the one featuring a trans character, it is the longest one in the book, but I wish that was the sole focus of the book, just because I really got attached to the character. So that is what we see in the cover. So this is the main story within To Strip the Flesh. We first get introduced to Chiaki Ogawa, who is a butcher who identifies as male. Our main character, Chiaki, happens to be a YouTuber, which I found pretty cool to actually read about, a content creator. So he happens to stream himself just butchering a carcass and that's how he makes money. Unfortunately, the audience does see the very curvy figure and does tip. So if he's stuck with his body, his thought processes might as well make a living out of it. And you can see his attitudes towards this in these panels right here. So he happens to be a 26-year-old man who is just trying to make the best out of an awful situation. Unfortunately, Chiaki is met with some terrible news when his father mentions that he has colon cancer, and before he passes away, he would like to see his daughter get married and settle down. Because Chiaki only has his father left, he doesn't want to disappoint him, so he tries his best to just make his father happy. Within the short story, you also do get to see some flashbacks, so you get to see Chiaki as a child. You can see Chiaki's identity and how much he cares about his father in panels such as this one. This story is pretty graphic. Like I mentioned, Chiaki is a butcher, and not only does Chiaki butcher animals, there is a scene that's pretty graphic where Chiaki's father actually butchers Chiaki's body and removes all the female organs as well. The short stories are definitely suited for an older teen to adult audience because it is quite graphic, but it is a very powerful story. It's told very well, and despite that, this story is only pretty much 2 chapters long. There's part 1 of Chiaki's story and part 2 after they complete the sexual reassignment surgery. You do get to experience a whole slew of emotions, from Chiaki's ups, the lows, and also you get to see Chiaki live life the way he truly wanted. I really enjoyed reading these short stories because not only do you get to see Chiaki live his life, his most authentic life, but his father actually is fully supportive and realizes that he can die, you know, happy because his son is actually living life the way he wants to. Like I mentioned, this book is a collection of short stories. About half of it is To Strip the Flesh, so you get Chiaki's story. I would buy it for just this. The other stories, some were better than others. Chiaki's story, definitely worth a read. Very complex, very powerful, and it just goes to show that if you're open-minded, you can definitely make the effort to learn to accept your child, just like Chucky's father did. My last recommendation is one that doesn't have physical copies yet, but you can read the first few chapters in English, and that is Villain by Fujita. And if Fujita sounds familiar, that is the same mangaka that wrote Wotakoi. Villain is inspired by a Vocaloid song by the same title by Tenny Woha. So like I said, it does not have physical copies, so here I am on my iPad. The title of the series is Villain, which is inspired by a Vocaloid song by the same name by producer Tenny Woha. So this story follows two boys right here. We have our delinquent and a very tortured soul right here. Our main character, Renri, is the delinquent who happens to be a transgender male. When we first get introduced to the two characters, we just kind of casually meet them in Renri's, not even apartment, because it's just literally crashed in an abandoned building. You kind of get to see like their bickering and just their friendship forming, but you can tell very early on that there are romantic feelings within this story. As I was first reading this, it just made me very happy to see something that I had just listened to, because it is a song, just actually drawn out. And within the first chapter, you get presented with the fact that he discovers that his friend that he's been crushing on was not a male at birth. I forgot to mention the name of the guy with blue hair. His name is Asuru. The story is written from Asuru's point of view, so you do get to experience Renri from his perspective, his adoration for him, and also how his romantic feelings evolved for Renri as well. Some of my favorite things about Villain, apart from the whole Vocaloid thing, because you guys know that I absolutely love Vocaloid music, is the friendship between the two boys, because they learn to depend on one another, they learn to accept each other. I mean, when Asuru first met Renri, he accepted him for being a delinquent and a bad boy, and then later on learns to accept the fact that he's a transgender male. Renri also becomes the person that makes Asuru question what is considered normal. So there's this panel right here which is a very big theme of the song, if we can go back to the Vocaloid song. So Renri asks, does not being normal make you a villain? And what even is normal? Who gets to decide that? These few panels really show the heart of the story, and also why I really enjoyed it and had to include it despite the fact that it doesn't have a printed physical copy. So that's it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know if you have any other recommendations that you would like to share about the trans experience in the comments below. I will be linking all the titles that I spoke about in the information bar below. Make sure to subscribe to keep up with more recommendations, and I will see you guys very soon in my next video. Happy Pride!